These stories are taken from the book Spills, Chills, and Thrills. Haunted Henry. It was a moonlit autumn night, and the Fat Controller had given Henry a special job. His job was to take a goods train along an old line that's going to be restored. As he was waiting for his train that was shunted by Edward, the engines heard the hoot of an owl. "Whenever that owl hoots, a mist rolls in," said Edward. "There's a legend, they say. It brings the ghost of a frogman who gone lost in the mist long ago and was never found." "I don't believe in ghosts," Henry snorted with a puff of steam. "And neither should you. Don't you have enough to do without scaring yourself with silly stories?" But as Henry steamed off with his goods train, he couldn't help thinking about Edward's story. "Owls, mists, ghosts," he grumbled to himself. "Edward's going to soften the boiler. There's no mist tonight." But Henry was wrong. As he chuffed down the old line that runs beside a lake, a thick blanket of mist settled over the rails. He could hardly see anything but the dark, spooky trees on either side of him. Through the mist, Henry saw a dim glow ahead. "What's that?" he asked fearfully. "It's an amber lamp," murmured his driver as they got closer. "It's a warning for us to be careful." Then Henry crept slowly forward. He stopped by a tree. It had a sign nailed to it, "Beware of the end of the line." The driver was surprised. No one warned us about that before, and look, the signal's red, and the gates are closed. And there's a frogman's coat. But where's his owner? "Who's there?" he called out. But no one replied. "Didn't Edward say the ghost was a frogman?" Henry puffed nervously. "But you don't believe in ghosts, Henry," his fireman teased. "I think we shall go back to the yards." Henry didn't answer. He just steamed away as fast as his wheels would carry him. By morning, the mist had cleared. A workman was talking about the end of the line. It is unsafe and being repaired. "Luckily you didn't cross it last night." "Yes, but we don't know who warned us," replied Henry's driver. But when Henry learned that he was to take another train over the line that very night, Henry's wheels were worried. Just then, Thomas chuffed into the yard. Henry told him about the legend and the spooky things he had seen the night before. "Rubbish," Thomas laughed cheekily. "Everyone knows there's no such thing as ghosts." "You weren't there," Henry chuffed with a shiver. "If you're so sure, why don't you take my train down the old line tonight?" No thank you," Thomas peeped, backing away. "I got a busy day tomorrow and needed my rest." And he wheezed away as fast as he could. By nightfall, Henry's firebox was sizzling nicely. As he waited for his driver, he heard the owl hoot again, and then Gordon thundered by with a clash of thunder. Henry almost jumped off the rails. "Oh look, Henry's spook!" laughed a truck rudely, and the others giggled in their silly way. "Be quiet," snapped Henry. "I'm not scared." But he was. As Henry shunted his trucks down the old line, the mist returned, thicker than the night before. Once again, he saw the amber light glowing through the gloom. "Here we go again," his driver said. "Steady now." The warning sign was still on the tree. "There's the frogman's coat again," Henry gasped as he rolled forwards inch by inch. The trucks had stopped laughing. Now they were as scared as Henry. Suddenly, the signal ahead went red, and the gates closed shut by themselves. A light flickered in the old station house, and a mysterious figure appeared at the window. "It's a ghost!" cried the trucks. "Faster, faster!" The frightened trucks jumped down the line and crashed through the gates, taking Henry with them. "Stop! Stop!" shouted Henry, but the trucks sped on. Up ahead was a pier, and it ended in buffers. Henry braked hard, but the trucks hit the buffers and plunged into the water. Luckily, Henry stopped, with only a flatbed and one truck still on the rails. Just then, Henry's driver saw a strange sight coming towards them. "What's that?" he asked. The fireman laughed. "That's our ghost. It's old Bailey, the fogman." Old Bailey was very cross as he stopped on his rusty pump trolley. "I tried to warn you about the end of the line. Why didn't you pay attention?" "We're sorry you ignored your warning," said Henry's driver. "We thought it was cleared." "Is there anything we could do to thank you?" "I'd like to open this old station again," replied Old Bailey, "and I promise I won't scare Henry any more." Soon after, Old Bailey's wish was granted. The station opened again with a grand celebration. Instead of the red fogman's coat, Old Bailey wore a blue station master's uniform and cap. "You will be really useful by warning us of any danger," said the Fat Controller. "Let's hear a big thank you to the friendliest, ghosts on the island." Everyone cheered, and Henry whistled happily. He always knew there was no such thing as ghosts. Halloween. It was full steam ahead, and the engines were running on time. They wanted to finish their work quickly, because tonight was Halloween. The engines loved seeing the children in their Halloween costumes, and the engines loved to hear tales of ghostly engines and scary steam trains. That evening, the Fat Controller came to the yards. "Thomas and Emily, you both must go to the smelter's yard. An important delivery of iron must be collected right away." "Yes, sir," both said. Percy thought the smelter's yard was really spooky. He was worried about his friends. "Look out for ghosts. It is Halloween." "There's no such thing as ghosts," Thomas said. "It's just silly make-believe," replied Emily, and they both steamed off to the smelter's yard. The sun was setting, and it was getting dark. Thomas and Emily both enjoyed feeling brave. But when they got to the smelter's yard, it was very spooky. They both passed slowly through the piles of jagged steel and twisted scrap. The air grew hotter, and the smoke grew thicker. Diesel's Ari and Bert were both lurking nearby. They saw a chance to scare a couple of steamies. When Thomas and Emily both rolled by, they moaned and groaned. It sounded really spooky. "What was that?" gasped Emily. "You said there was no such thing as ghosts." "Silly make-believe, you said," responded Thomas. Suddenly, a truck began to shudder and shake. "Signals and ashes!" cried Thomas. "Help!" wailed Emily. "It's a ghost! Let's get away from here!" They didn't know Ari and Bert had been bumping the flatbed's buffers. The two naughty diesels were both having great fun. When they went into the smelter's shed ready to collect the trucks, everywhere they see were shadows. Must be brave," said Thomas. Emily was turning around ready to shun some trucks. Suddenly, a great whoosh of sparks lit up the shed. "Bust my buffers!" cried Emily. She was so scared and didn't notice a huge white tarpaulin. It fell, covering her from funnel to footplate. "The ghost! It's got me!" She steamed away as fast as her pistons could pump. Thomas thought Emily was the ghost, and he raced out of the smelting shed. "The ghost is after me!" he cried out. Ari and Bert both thought Emily was the ghost too, and they both raced away. Thomas was right behind them, and Emily was right behind Thomas. "Help!" Emily wailed. "The ghost has got me!" Ari and Bert, Thomas and Emily raced towards the sheds. The sheds were really quiet and peaceful. All the engines were fast asleep. Thomas's whistle soon woke them up. "It's Thomas! Something must be wrong," said Percy. Suddenly he saw Thomas, Ari and Bert racing into the yards. "Stop!" he yelled. Ari and Bert and Thomas all applied their brakes. They stopped just in time. "The ghost is after us!" shouted Thomas. Percy looked ahead, but just then Emily raced under a signal and the tarpaulin flew off. "That's no ghost, that's Emily!" The engines didn't feel scared anymore, but they did feel very foolish. The Fat Controller arrived wearing his pajamas. "What is all this fuss and bother? It has caused confusion and delay. Thomas and Emily explain everything. The Fat Controller looked at Arian Bird. Do you know anything about this? He asked sternly. It was us, sir, Bert mumbled. For your punishment, you will go back and collect the iron at once, he boomed. Yes, sir, both Diesels said, and they rumbled away. Thomas and Emily went back to the smelter's yard to collect the trucks after Arian Bird had shunted for them. They were very relieved. They both knew there was nothing to be scared of. After all, there was no such thing as ghosts. It was all silly make-believe. Scare the engines. The engines are looking forward to the end of the Halloween season. They love the Fat Controller's fireworks and the children dressing up. They also love Edward's spooky stories. They say that on Halloween, the ghost engine returns to the smelters looking for his lost woo-woo whistle. Ooh, ah, spooky, the engine said, all shivering a little. Later, the Fat Controller arrived. Thomas, Percy, and Duck, you are to collect some scrap from the smelter's yard tonight. On Halloween? Don't worry, Percy. You'll be back in time for the fireworks. Percy isn't worried about missing the fireworks, teased Thomas. He's a scaredy engine. I am not, called Percy, but he was a little. At the smelters, all Percy could think about was Edward's ghost engine. Thomas knew Percy was scared, so he teased him even more. What's that up there? Thomas squeaked. Is it a spook? It's just a piece of twisted scrap, Percy said nervously. Isn't it? Thomas was having fun. He kept on teasing Percy. Careful the ghost engine doesn't get you, Thomas said. There's no such thing as ghosts, snapped Percy. Duck felt sorry for Percy. Nobody's brave all the time, said Duck. But I'm not a scaredy engine, Percy insisted. The job was nearly completed. Well done, the yard manager said. Now I need one engine to finish up. Duck wanted to pay Thomas back for all his teasing. Please, sir, he said. I'm sure Thomas wouldn't mind staying. Of course not, Thomas boasted. I'm not a scaredy engine. So Duck and Percy left. When Thomas was by himself, every sound and every shadow was spooky. He was beginning to feel very scared. There's no such thing as ghosts, he said. Who's there? Thomas was so busy looking for ghosts, he didn't watch where he was going. The chains feel like ghost fingers. Something's got me, Thomas wished and set off an old steam whistle. The ghost whistle, said Thomas, and he raced away as fast as his wheels could carry him. The ghost engine is after me! It was naughty of Thomas to tease you, Percy, said Duck. He's only playing, said Percy. I hope he hurries up. I wouldn't want him to be late for the fireworks. He's after me! I don't think he'll be late, said Duck. Duck and Percy joined the other engines for the fireworks. Where's Thomas? Percy asked. He's missed all the fun. It would serve him right after all his teasing, Duck said. But Percy was worried. He went to look for his friend. He found Thomas all alone in the shed. Are you alright, Thomas? He said. Yes, I'm sorry I teased you, Percy, Thomas said. Duck was right. We all feel scared sometimes. That's alright, Percy said. I'm glad you actually admit. Come on, Thomas. We can watch the fireworks just as well from here. And he was right, as both engines watched the fireworks completely. Jack Frost. It was an icy day, and the engines were working very hard. They didn't mind the cold because they had toasting hot fireboxes to keep them warm. That evening, the Fat Controller came to the sheds. There's a big freeze coming tonight, he said. James and Percy, you are to deliver extra coal to the stations. Yes, sir, they said eagerly, and the Fat Controller drove away. You better hurry, teased Thomas, or Scary Jack Frost might get you. Who's Jack Frost? Percy whistled nervously. Don't be so silly, sniffed James. Jack Frost is not scary. Oh, yes, he is, teased Thomas. He's all white with a big spiky face. Rubbish, said James. James knew Jack Frost wasn't scary, but poor Percy wasn't so sure. Percy shivered. Jack Frost is not scary, Jack Frost is not scary, he said to himself as he puffed along his route. Meanwhile, James puffed along his route. Silly Percy, he thought, all steamed up over Jack Frost. Percy made his last delivery. The station master was very pleased to see him. Thank you, the station master said, but we need twice as much coal to last through this freeze. Don't worry, this is my last stop. You can have mine, Percy said. So Percy's driver parked him in the siding with only a lantern for company. Do you think scary Jack Frost will find me? Said Percy. Jack Frost is not scary, chuckled his driver, and don't worry, Elizabeth will bring you some more coal in the morning. And then his driver and fireman went home to bed. Later that night, the icy wind howled. It started to snow. Soon Percy's face was so cold, an icicle hung from his nose. Oh, bother! Percy shuddered. But it didn't sound like Percy. It was so cold, he could hardly make a sound. At last, James was on his way back to the sheds. In the fog, he saw shadows and strange and scary shapes. Scary Jack Frost, he whispered nervously. Pah! But as he approached a station with a siding, he saw something shocking. Hello, James, muttered Percy icily. Scary Jack Frost, cried James, and he raced away as fast as his wheels could carry him. He didn't stop until he got back to the sheds. The next morning, Elizabeth brought plenty of coal. Oh, my dear, Elizabeth chirped to Percy. It looks like Jack Frost really got to you then. The firelighter started Percy's fire. Soon his ice mask melted away. So scary Jack Frost is only frost, tooted Percy happily, and soon he was as warm as toast. When Percy arrived at the sheds, James was bragging to the other engines. I saw scary Jack Frost last night, James huffed. He even knows my name. He also knows that you ran away, teased Percy. And all the engines whistled, including James, but Percy was the loudest whistle of all.